20th century brings a renewed interest in rhetoric. Alongside the composition teaching and practice that's going on in schools, and alongside the democratic uses of rhetoric from the courts and judicial environments to the legislatures and so on, we also have a renewed interest in theorizing about rhetoric. There are many important figures in the 20th century, but really there's no one who comes along and has an impact on the discipline that is as huge as Kenneth Burke. There are other folks out there. There's Richard Weaver and I.A. Richards, for two that are of particular importance. We won't be talking about them much in class because Kenneth Burke actually offers new language, a new way of looking at the rhetorical act. One of the things that Kenneth Burke offers us is that he is not situated in a discipline. In fact, he wasn't an academic. He didn't come up through an English department. He wasn't a teacher. He was a public intellectual. He wrote for local, not for local, but for national publications, and he was involved in politics. The reason this matters and is important is because I think he illustrates so well the interdisciplinary nature of rhetoric. He brings language together from religion, from psychology, from every place you can imagine, literature, science, and brings these fields together to talk about life as we know it. I think Kenneth Burke is refreshing in this sense because he's not so much continuing a tradition and building on it as he is thinking about it again. And so we will get really a new sort of rhetoric from Burke. This is a picture of the battlefields in World War I, and I give these pictures. In fact, there are much more gruesome pictures out there, but I think World War I is emblematic for me of what is going on in the 20th century. And what is happening in the 20th century is that because of technology, we're able to communicate in ways that we've never been able to communicate before. And the result of that communication, that uniting, that ability to talk to other people, has the odd sort of side effect of creating global wars. So this World War I is a huge achievement for mankind in that we are able to put our technologies together, work together to attempt to eliminate each other from the face of the earth. And these desperate times and these desperate situations left most cultural critics and public intellectuals stunned. One of my favorite poems from the period is Randall Jarrell, who said that he hoped he would not be remembered only for this poem. And I'm afraid that the poem is so incredible that it's hard not to remember him for it. The death of the ball turret gunner. From my mother's sleep I fell into the state, and I hunched in its belly till my wet fur froze. 6 miles from earth, loosed from its dream of life, I woke to black flak and the nightmare fighters. When I died, they washed me out of the turret with a hose. In the photograph above, you can see the arrow pointing to the little knob at the bottom of the B-17. That is the ball turret where the gunner sat. So it's a lovely piece of technology. It means that you've got a soldier out there. He can shoot. He doesn't have to worry about flying the plane. Of course, the other thing that happens is that he is really vulnerable. And the livelihood and survival rates of ball turret gunners was poor. They didn't have a great chance of surviving in these roles. And I think that some of the most amazing images are of the turrets being cleaned out at the end of a mission, and what is left of a human being is being hosed out in that. Again, this sense of optimism about our ability to make planes fly and to communicate and to talk to each other via radio goes hand in hand with these bombs dropping and these young boys dying in horrific circumstances. Another famous poem from the period, William Butler Yeats, The Second Coming, and the famous line from this poem is, "The center cannot hold." This sense that things are falling apart. The falcon cannot hear the falconer. That is, the falcon can't hear the person who's controlling him. We have passionate intensity and total lack of conviction. Again, this is this terrible sense that we find awakening at the beginning of the 20th century, which is a nightmare state, a sense that there's no meaning, that the things that we thought we understood, that we don't understand. I do believe that the rushing of technology often creates these states of confusion, and I think particularly when that technology is specifically related to war, we end up with some very scary moments and a sort of awe at our ability, that shock and awe that a president has talked about. I think the ability to destroy at this level is awesome, and probably not in an uplifting way for most people experiencing the situation. From Kenneth Burke, we get the following quotation, the definition of man. He says, "Man is the symbol using, symbol making, symbol misusing animal, inventor of the negative, or moralized by the negative, separated from his natural condition by instruments of his own making, goaded by the spirit of hierarchy, or moved by the sense of order, and rotten with perfection." This is a quotation that I think really represents Burke well, both in terms of his at times impenetrably difficult writing, but also the fascination that he has with the inside-outness of the situation that we're in. I think you would have to take every phrase of this quotation apart to fully understand it. Man is symbol using. We make symbols, we misuse symbols, and we're the only creatures who do this. Because of this, we have invented the negative. Now, one of the claims I think that Burke is making is that language itself introduces the concept of the negative. Some have argued that it's only language, in fact, that creates the concept of the negative, or the not being as well as the being. Note that the next phrase is moralized by the negative. In order to have shoulds, those shoulds are dependent on should nots. We are separated from our natural condition by instruments of our own making. Again, these instruments of our own making, I think Burke has in mind everything from language to technology. That we are removed from that animal state and moved into a different sort of state, which is one of making symbols. And we're goaded, I love this verb, goaded by the spirit of hierarchy. And then he offers again the more perhaps conventional knowledge, or moved by the sense of order. Note that, again, one of the powers that language, and particularly written language, gives us is an almost built-in sense of hierarchy. Language itself seems to spur us into the notion that some things are better than others, that we can rate things in certain ways, and also that we can create taxonomies and categories. So this sense of order and the spirit of hierarchy. And then he says, and we are rotten with perfection. So that drive for perfection, that drive for getting it right, that drive for the product that is perfect, makes us rotten, in part because of the side effects. Anytime we're goaded by this spirit of hierarchy, what we do is create something that's on top, and by definition, something that's on bottom. In fact, we need the thing on bottom in order to have the thing on top. It is only through this process of blowing you up that I have power, or by eliminating your behavior, I can celebrate my own. So you always have this tug of war in Burke about the creation that language gives us, the power that it gives us, and the negative that it gives us. This is not an optimistic view of language. Burke is not entering into the world in the way that Aristotle and Plato did, which is that language can, and for that matter, Isocrates, language can organize the world for us. It can build these fantastic structures. Rather, Burke is saying anytime you build a fantastic structure, you're also destroying in order to do that. Anytime you have a group, you also have an outside the group. Every time you have an us, you have a them. Or, for that matter, just an I, which is a less powerful sort of individual. So the notion of division, I would say, in many ways, is the fundamental bottom line of what Burke is facing. Division meaning I am separated from you, I am divided, I am divisive, I am at war in so many ways. I cannot speak to you, I cannot connect with you, and I destroy you. And I think that Burke is very keyed into this aspect. Now, the whole thing isn't a huge negative. I think he also looks at the constructive. And we're going to look at the sorts of language that he uses to construct this rhetoric. But I wanted you to be left with, on this introductory lecture, a sense of alienation that the individuals who were really shaping culture felt at the beginning of the 20th century. The senses of connection that we've never had before that created the senses of isolation and confusion that we perhaps had never expressed in quite the same way. That our ability to join forces with one another makes us able to destroy and eliminate others in that way. That we become very, very gifted with our technologies for both the positive and the negative. So I ask you to click on the link below and let that image and that video shape your view of what ushers in the new rhetoric in the 20th century.